On the way to the capital to seek refuge with my father, I encountered mountain bandits. My mother had her illegitimate daughter take my place to claim kinship, while she handed me over to the bandits. Unexpectedly, the bandits respected my mother's integrity in sacrificing her own daughter to protect the daughter of her benefactor, and they let them go. When we met again, my mother had become the wife of the Prime Minister. The illegitimate daughter Wang Xuebao transformed into my twin sister, married the Crown Prince of the Eastern Palace as his principal consort, and became the mother of the nation. Yet I was tormented in turn by mountain bandits, passed around and sold into a brothel, ridden by thousands and trampled by tens of thousands. The only child I ever bore was trampled into a pulp by a general who adored Wang Xuebao. I begged Wang Xuebao to return my child's body, but she said, "You willingly offered yourself to the mountain bandits to survive. Then degraded yourself as a prostitute in the brothel. You are utterly unworthy of being my sister. That bastard child of yours dying under the mighty general's horse was an honor." That very night, I was disfigured by Wang Xuebao's patrons, my tongue cut out, and thrown into the moat. When I opened my eyes again, I had returned to the day my mother kicked me out of the carriage. This time, let Wang Xuebao be the one to become the woman everyone can have. Hello, everyone. Welcome to my channel. Subscribe us to read wonderful stories every day. Now the story begins. She is the only daughter of this year's top scholar, Chen Jinju. Capturing her means endless wealth. I am her mother. I am willing to let her serve you. Heroes, I only ask that you let my benefactor's daughter go. Familiar words echoed in my ears. I struggled to open my eyes and saw several bandits restraining my hands, eyeing me greedily. The exact same scene. I had returned to the beginning of my fate in my past life. I immediately spoke up. "I am not Chen Jinju, Auntie Chen. You can't throw me out to take the blame just to protect your own daughter. It was my father who saved your life. In my past life, my mother let the bandits take me away, saying that once we reached the capital, my father would send troops to rescue me. She said the bandit leader valued loyalty, and as long as I showed some integrity, I wouldn't suffer too much, even if I lost my innocence. A mother would never look down on her daughter. Back then, I believed it. I waited and waited, but even after the bandits were wiped out and I was sold from one place to another, they never came looking for me." Thinking of this, hatred nearly robbed me of my reason. I forced myself to calm down and pondered. I've heard that the leader of Feihu Mountain values loyalty above all. Could it be that you would assist a tyrant and turn a blind eye to such an act of selling the daughter of your benefactor for survival? Several of the mountain bandits showed hesitation in their eyes. These bandits were originally oppressed serfs who turned to banditry in the mountains to survive, having not yet experienced killing and plundering, and still retained some humanity. Seeing me making wild accusations, Mother angrily snapped in a cold voice, "Shut up. You are clearly my own daughter, born from my womb after 10 months of pregnancy. What mother doesn't love her own flesh and blood? You hold that girl in your arms so protectively anyone can see you're her birth mother. How could I possibly be your daughter?" Hatred nearly burned through my reason. Staring at Mother holding Wang Xuebao, I wished I could tear their flesh apart with my teeth. They share a deep mother-daughter bond. But what about me? Am I just meant to be Wang Xuebao's stepping stone? The bandit glanced at me, then yanked Mother and Wang Xuebao out of the carriage. Carefully comparing them, I immediately spread open my hands, covered in fine scars. My father died saving Aunt Chen, yet she took advantage of my lack of support, demoting me to a servant to wait on her and her daughter day and night. If I were her daughter, how could my hands be so worn and aged? I lied without batting an eye. Even if I couldn't escape the bandits' den, I'd drag both of them down to hell with me. Moreover, all the farm work and household chores at home are done by me. Mother dotes on Wang Xuebao so much that she has never even done the work of tending the fire or adding firewood, so her hands are naturally extremely delicate. I dared to bite back at them, betting that under the current leadership of the chief, these bandits still have some human decency and courage. The bandits, having heard my words and seeing how Mother was protecting Wang Xuebao, were already mostly convinced. Looking at my rough hands, I immediately spat on my mother's face. Although we are bandits, we still value brotherhood. This girl's father saved your life, which is a great favor. Not only did you fail to treat her well, but you also pushed her out to take the blame. You are truly heartless and unjust. You deserve to die. My mother's expression changed, seeing the situation turn against her. She immediately stood up and grabbed my hair. "Warrior, this wretch really is the child I carried for 10 months. Seeing this, the bandit sided with me even more. "You don't act like a mother at all. It's clear you're a vicious, heartless woman." Her eyes, brimming with fury, seemed to pierce right through me. Chen Jinju, may you die a miserable death. I let out a cold laugh. Chen Jinju may indeed die a miserable death, but it's your precious daughter who will meet that fate, not me. In truth, in my previous life, I should never have ended up in such a wretched state. The bandit leader, upon hearing his subordinate speak of my situation, paid it no mind and simply placed me in the village. He said that if my mother were willing to exchange 1,000 gold pieces for me, he would return me untouched. But even after the bandit leader was killed by his rebellious brothers and I became a tool for the mountain stronghold's desires, no one came to save me. It shows that one must save oneself. Wang Xuebao couldn't hold back, raising her tear-filled eyes. Sister, why are you twisting the truth? Clearly, you are mother's daughter. Her amorous eyes, glistening and crystal clear, could captivate anyone at a single glance. In her past life, it was the same. Just by showing a hint of grievance and endurance, everyone around her would have gladly died for her. Everyone treated her like a precious treasure. But what about me? Was I just meant to be tormented to death by them? Mother hurriedly buried Xuebao's face against her chest, her eyes overflowing with heartache. Baoer, don't cry, don't be sad over such a heartless beast. When the mountain bandits chief arrives, he will surely let us go. My heart skipped a beat. How could she be so sure that the chief would come and they would be able to leave safely? Suspicious, I stared coldly at them. You call her mother, so aren't you her daughter? Wang Xuebao let out a faint sob, like a newly weaned kitten, tugging at one's heartstrings. Sister, I don't know why you're so angry. Mother wants to save me to repay a kindness. How can you talk nonsense at a time like this and disregard mother's safety? Ha! You don't feel the pain until the knife is at your own neck. I've already experienced the consequences of obedient compliance in my past life. In their eyes, if they raise the butcher's knife and I don't obediently offer my neck for slaughter, then my crime is beyond redemption. Is it you all performing the act of the real and fake daughters here? A gentle voice sounded from behind, when Chen Yu, with the air of a scholar, stood behind me. His eyes were cold, his gaze as calm as water, his posture as upright as a pine tree. He didn't resemble a bandit, but rather a scholarly young master from a prominent clan. His gaze shifted back and forth between me and Wang Xuebao. Wang Xuebao, as if pricked by a needle, suddenly buried her face in her mother's embrace. Her mother also tightly shielded Wang Jinju's face, her gaze toward me chilling to the bone. She must have hated me to the core, daring to put her precious Xuebao in danger. My heart sank bit by bit to the bottom. If my mother had even the slightest chance to turn the tables, she would stop at nothing to kill me. I've heard that the leader is a renowned benevolent bandit. I beg the leader to uphold justice for me. I stared resolutely at Wen Qianyu, my face full of stubbornness. Wen Qianyu glanced at me with a smile, then pointed his fan at Wang Xuebao. Are they truly the wife and daughter of the top scholar? I curled my lips into a smile. Exactly. Chen Jinju is the only daughter of this year's top scholar. Holding his wife and daughter hostage can bring endless treasures. Moreover, Chen Jinju is exceptionally beautiful and will surely please everyone in the leader's stronghold. I gave Wang Xuebao a hard shove. Ah! Wang Xuebao cried out in surprise, lifting her head from her mother's chest, revealing a pitifully delicate face. The bandits all gasped, their eyes greedily fixed on Wang Xuebao. Boss, this mother and daughter are from an official's family, and they're vicious at heart. Why not keep them? The brothers haven't had any fun in a long time following you, boss. Haven't they also been feasting on the people's flesh and blood as part of an official's family? We are acting on behalf of heaven, so let us also take it easy. Wang Xuebao trembled all over. In my past life, even with my modest looks, I suffered endless hardships. Wang Xuebao, with her stunningly beautiful face, could captivate everyone from the crown prince down to the steward's son. I imagine she must have received plenty of affection in this bandit den. When Qianyu smiled faintly, glanced at the panic-stricken Wang Xuebao, and then looked deeply at me. Indeed, they are exceptionally beautiful. They may stay, but you must leave. That glance was unfathomable, as if it could see right through me, and an inexplicable chill rose in my heart. But on the surface, I let out a heavy sigh of relief and looked coldly at my mother. Aunt Chen, although you have treated me poorly in every way, I remember that you at least gave me food to survive. Today, I will not hold it against you for selling me to save your own daughter. From now on, you and your daughter will serve the heroes of the village well here. When I reach the capital, I will send a message to the top scholar, saying that you have remarried and taken your daughter with you. After saying this, I bowed slightly to Wen Qianyu. Thank you, hero. After I leave, I will never speak of what happened today, whether in my past life or this one. I have always been grateful to Wen Qianyu. As long as Wen Qianyu was alive, the bandits still had some restraint. If I worked hard, I could have food to eat. Although there were occasional inappropriate advances, I always managed to preserve my chastity. Chen Jinju, may you die a miserable death. I should have strangled you long ago. My mother panicked, lunging at me like a madwoman. If anything happens to Cuebao, I'll tear you to pieces. Our Cuebao is a phoenix that fell into a chicken coop. She's finally about to return to the phoenix's nest. How can you be so vicious? She's going to marry a nobleman and become a lady of high status. But she didn't struggle for long before bandits tied her up, stuffed a rag into her mouth, and threw her into a carriage. I leaned close to her ear and whispered with a light laugh, "Mother, you'd better save your energy for screaming, in the coming days. You and that bastard child of yours will have plenty of chances to cry out. Let's see how your phoenix Cuebao, once defiled, can still become a noble lady or a titled madam. I think she'd be more suited to become a whore ridden by thousands and trampled by millions. In my past life, I was the one being devoured. In this life, I intend to be the one who devours others, to avenge my child and seize a bright future for myself." I tore my dress, cut off my long hair with a stone, smeared dirt and ash on my face, and deliberately worked up a sweat. Whenever someone passed by, they would cover their noses and keep their distance. These are troubled times. In the years I struggled to survive, barely clinging to life, rebellions broke out in various regions as feudal lords rose up, and many honest citizens turned to banditry. The imperial court often sent troops to suppress them, yet the forces of rebellion continued to emerge without end. When the world is harsh and survival is impossible, people have no choice but to break everything and start anew. I was penniless, and the journey to the capital alone would only be more difficult. I had no choice but to disguise myself as a male beggar, begging for food along the way. But I never expected to run into an acquaintance here, gazing at the once mighty, heroic general who had quelled rebellions everywhere in my past life. Now reduced to a homeless man being driven away from place to place, the confusion in my heart finally cleared up. No wonder my mother and Wang Cuebao, two delicate women, managed to reach the capital smoothly. They had long planned to travel together. No wonder my mother was so certain the bandit chief would let them go. They knew from the start that he was the most righteous bandit within 100 miles and wouldn't trouble a mother and daughter. I was left behind at the bandits' den as part of their scheme. From the very beginning, my mother never intended to take me to the capital. Standing in the crowd, I glared fiercely at Zhao He, a sharp, stabbing pain rising in my heart. In my previous life, I had a child named Kaya, born to me and Zhao He. That time, Zhao He chanted the name of Wang Cuebao, who had become the crown princess, while beating, insulting, and taking pleasure with me. My heart ached, yet I couldn't bear to push him away. Just that once, I became pregnant. Kaya was only 3 years old, barely able to call me mother clearly, but Zhao He threw him under a horse, trampling him back and forth until he was crushed into a bloody pulp. Zhao He grabbed my hair, pulling me up from the ground to face him, his handsome face filled with disgust. He covered his mouth and nose with a white silk handkerchief and ordered his soldiers to strip off my clothes. "You're filthy. Just the thought of you using Cuebao's twin sister's name to work as a prostitute feels like a stain on Cuebao herself. And that disgusting child of yours, why did you even give birth to him? Was it to escape your lowly status and become a general's wife, or to blackmail me? You're utterly repulsive. How dare you continue living in this world? But he is my childhood sweetheart, my betrothed. I always thought I had a place in his heart. Even his mother, I served day and night. And I mourned her in funeral robes when she passed." Later, he cut out my tongue, and in a fit of jealousy with the crown prince, he pushed me before the prince, using a knife as a brush and my face as paper. Playing a game of chess together, I was tortured to death. Now, the mighty general, clad in coarse hemp clothes, stood before the towering city gate, pondering how to sneak into the city. "Calm down." Digging my newly grown nails deep into the flesh of my palm, I forced myself to calm down. When blood began to seep from my palm, I stood beside Zhao He, feigning surprise. "Brother Zhao He, what are you doing here?" Zhao He's eyes lit up, eagerly looking behind me. Seeing that I was alone, his expression changed slightly. "Kui, where are Auntie and Cuebao?" After getting a clear look at me, a trace of disgust flashed in Zhao He's eyes as he subtly took a step back, his urgency growing even more intense. My eyes reddened as I said urgently, "Brother Zhao He, Mother and I encountered thieves on the way, and now we don't even have the money for my sister's treatment." Zhao He's face changed dramatically. "Cuebao is sick. Is she in serious condition?" "She's on the verge of death." "Brother Zhao He, Please come with me to see my sister. If she can see you, she might die in peace. Zhao He frowned, displeased with my words, a cold glint flashing in his sharp eyes. I took note of his reaction and inwardly sneered. It turns out Zhao He's disguise has always been so clumsy, but in the past, my heart and eyes were so full of him that I never once considered his heart belonged to Wang Tsuebao. Without even glancing at Zhao He's expression, I led him to the dilapidated temple where we had rested the day before. Brother Zhao He, come quickly. Zhao He walked with steady steps, but upon entering the temple and not seeing the figure he had longed for day and night, his eyes darkened completely. Where is the person? His voice was icy, capable of freezing one into a cold rod, commanding authority without even showing anger. No wonder he could become a valiant general, leading the imperial troops to suppress the rebel forces everywhere. He was indeed a hero, but for that corrupt and oppressive court to continue its reign would be the greatest evil to the people. I raised my eyebrows high and laughed arrogantly. Your beloved Tsuebao, she's probably under one mountain bandit after another right now. Zhao He's face turned completely cold, his eyes flashing with heartache and intense killing intent. How could you escape? How dare you abandon Tsuebao and save yourself? She's such a delicate girl, how could she endure such humiliation? You're driving her to her death. You wicked-hearted woman, you deserve to go to hell. The blade was sharp, swift as a flash of lightning. He had murder in his heart. No, it should be said that he never intended to let me live, from the very beginning. He had conspired with my mother to kill me and make way for Wang Tsuebao. My marriage contract with him would naturally fall to Wang Tsuebao, when Chen Yu is a well-known benevolent bandit in the surrounding counties, and they concluded that even if they ventured into his territory, their lives would not be in danger. As long as I remained with the bandits, whether I was violated or not, I couldn't go to the capital. I was a woman who should commit suicide to preserve my purity. Fortunately, I had been prepared and avoided Zhao He's advances. Zhao He sneered, you wretch, today you're done for. Before you die, let me teach you a lesson. Don't lie, I've been following you since you set out, only losing track of Tsuebao these past few days. You lured me to this desolate temple. I knew your intentions were sinister from the start. Your death here today is entirely your own doing. In the future, open your eyes wide and don't commit evil deeds without knowing your limits. But you won't need that in this lifetime. In your next life, don't let me run into you again, or I'll chop you into pieces once more. With that, the dagger thrust straight toward me. I quickly pulled lime from my pocket and flung it all into his eyes. Knowing the dangers of traveling alone, how could I not have any means of self-defense? As the lime entered his eyes, Zhao He immediately let out a sharp cry of pain. I quickly took out a sharpened stone and slashed it hard across his neck. Then let me give you a lesson too. When you sense something is wrong, you must act in time. You thought you were a wolf toying with a rabbit, but you didn't know that even a rabbit will bite when cornered. This stone, which I've polished day and night, may not compare to Zhao He's razor-sharp dagger, but it's sharp enough to slit his throat. But I didn't take his life. Thick, dark red blood kept oozing from his neck. Zhao He endured the pain, his primal instincts ignited, showing every intention of taking me down with him. Fortunately, he was blind, so I grabbed a handful of straw from the ground and threw it at him, then took advantage of his distraction to kick the dagger out of his hand. In that moment, the tables turned, and a flash of fear crossed Zhao He's handsome face. Jinju, I was only joking with you just now. Have you forgotten that I'm your fiancé? I love you in my heart. Let me go, and we can pretend nothing ever happened. Let's just be an ordinary couple, alright? No need. I fiercely raised the dagger and stabbed viciously at Zhao He's hands and feet. Wasn't he the great heroic general? I want to see how a man with crippled hands and feet can be a general. I want him to live as a beggar worse off than death for the rest of his life. Watching with open eyes as I rise step by step to high positions, I want to show him my glory. Wang Tsuebao's parents are shameless in their illicit affair. And you're just as selfish as Wang Tsuebao. I should have killed you. But how could I let you die without seeing my mother and Wang Tsuebao get their retribution? Brother Zhao He, this is what you all deserve. Remember, this is your retribution. You deserve it. I gritted my teeth. The deep-seated hatred burning in my chest, streams of blood gushed continuously from Zhao He's neck and the tendons of his wrists and ankles. More than the excruciating pain, what he feared more was the possibility of actually dying. From suspecting my ill intentions to calmly stabbing me, he never imagined he would be defeated by a woman he looked down upon, nor did he ever think he would become a lamb waiting to be slaughtered. Sure enough, a knife doesn't hurt until it cuts your own flesh. Zhao He was both shocked and horrified. You're not Jinju. I laughed heartily. Of course I'm not Chen Jinju. I'm a demon crawling back from hell, here to collect your debts." He squirmed on the ground like a pig with its limbs severed. I stomped hard on his wound, and he let out a wail like a dying beast. The more he did this, the more pleasure I felt, though I always feared he might actually die. I stripped off his clothes, took out his money, and kept it all for myself. His pleas turned into curses. "May you die a miserable death. If you had even half the goodness of Tsuebao, I wouldn't be disgusted at the sight of you. You deserve to burn in the 18th layer of hell. In the next life, I will surely kill you." I pulled out his foul-smelling tongue, the dagger gliding over it. "Don't you want your tongue anymore, Zhao?" He immediately froze, not moving a muscle. "TSK," I chuckled. What a man of unyielding integrity. After that, I paid him no further mind. This dilapidated temple was usually deserted. Whether Zhao he lived or died, whether someone would come to his rescue, that was all his fate. If he were to die, it would be heaven's mercy. If he survives, I'll make him regret being alive. Dressed in Zhao his clothes, I looked more like a frail man. I just didn't expect to see Wen Qianyu not far away as soon as I stepped out of the temple gate. After a moment's thought, I paused my steps. What a coincidence, running into the chief here. Away from the bandits' den, his demeanor seemed more like that of a scholar. When Qianyu looked at me with a complicated gaze, his expression still cold and detached, he had recognized me, he had witnessed my ferocity, yet he remained as unruffled as ever. I felt uneasy and just wanted to leave quickly. "Chief, if there's nothing else, I'll take my leave now, Chen Jinju." When Qianyu spoke slowly, calling out my name in an instant, I froze abruptly, every hair on my body standing on end. "You know I'm the real Chen Jinju." Could he have discovered that I deliberately left my mother and Wang Tsuebao in the bandits' den? Does he intend to capture me and take me back? My palms are soaked with sweat. When Qianyu spoke slowly, "Do you believe in past lives and present lives?" Whoosh. My mind seemed to clear at that moment, and I looked at Wen Qianyu in disbelief. I always knew he was an extraordinary man. What kind of bandit could rally such a loyal band of brothers to risk life and death with him? What kind of bandit carries himself with the air of a scholar, his hands unstained by blood? And what kind of bandit, after being killed by his own subordinate, still has most of the stronghold's men seek revenge for him? I always knew he was a capable man, one who won people's hearts. I just never expected he would speak of past lives and present destinies. My knuckles tightened unconsciously. Has the great chieftain been reading too many operas? There's no such thing as past lives or present destinies. What really matters is living well in the here and now. I couldn't help but feel a pang of sorrow, realizing that the most stable and joyful days of my previous life were actually spent working in the bandit den he established, where I earned my daily food through labor. In both lifetimes combined, he never wronged me. After a moment of consideration, I looked into Wen Qianyu's eyes and spoke vaguely. "Boss, you are a righteous man, but sometimes one cannot be too righteous or too trusting of those under you. In my past life, he trusted his brothers too much and ended up beheaded by a subordinate who wanted to surrender to the imperial court and become an official. I hope he can live longer in this life. Whether he takes it to heart or not is up to him. I have done what I ought to do." When Qianyu was taken aback for a moment, then chuckled lightly. "Thank you for the reminder. I have finally arrived in the capital. I had thought that making the journey would cost me half my life. I must thank Wen Qianyu for arranging an escort to ensure my safe arrival in the capital." As soon as I presented my travel pass at the city gate, a well-dressed elderly woman approached, inquired about me, and led me to her home. The woman said her young lady, aware that my mother and I were coming and fearing we might not find my father's residence in the capital, had been waiting for us for half a month. The young lady she referred to is my father's concubine in the capital, Madame Ayu. I had a brief encounter with her. She was a woman of gentle disposition. At that time, I saw my mother again and begged her to save me from the sea of fire, but mother ordered someone to cover my mouth and nose, forcing me to drink poison. She knelt at mother's feet and pleaded on my behalf. "Although the eldest young lady has fallen into the world of pleasure, she is still your flesh and blood. You could tell the outside world that she has drowned herself in the river and keep her in a rural estate as an ordinary peasant woman. Why must you force her to her death?" Mother kicked her away coldly, exuding the authority of the Prime Minister's wife. "You seductive vixen, a born lowly servant. How dare you sympathize with this filthy thing? If she lives, how will people view the crown princess? If you dare tell the master that this wretch is still alive, I will make your parents, brothers, and sisters-in-law all die along with her." Wang Tsuebao, standing behind mother, fixed her gaze on me, frowning deeply with a look of exasperation. "Sister, I never thought you'd have the nerve to keep living. If I were you, after being captured by bandits, I would have killed myself to preserve my purity. How could you put mother in such a difficult position? You are truly unfilial. Later, it was Madame Ayu who spent money to send me to a medical clinic, and that's how I survived, though my health was completely ruined. Thinking of this, I can't help but feel nervous. Is this Madame Ayu as kind-hearted as she was in my past life? In my past life, when she pleaded with mother on my behalf, it was a warmth I had never known before. The woman diligently led me to the carriage, and after a journey of turning wheels, we entered a refined and noble residence through a side gate. I had my own thoughts on the matter. My father came from a humble background. To save on travel expenses for the imperial exams, he had left for the capital before I was born, barely making a living by copying books for others. Later, he was able to study in peace thanks to the support of his concubine's family. I followed the woman through several corridors and stopped at an elegant courtyard. Before the woman could even announce our arrival, a slender figure hurried over, adjusting her clothes. Her slender figure was accentuated by a prominently swollen belly, making her a delicate beauty. Upon seeing me, Liunyang was taken aback for a moment, but she didn't mind my sour and unkempt state, taking my hand to ask warmly about my well-being. Are you the master's eldest daughter, Jinju? Why isn't the lady of the house with you? Is the lady pregnant? I asked, staring at Liunyang's bulging belly. In the previous life, father publicly claimed to have only 2 daughters. Liunyang gently placed her delicate hand on her belly, smiling with happiness. It's already the 7th month. I just want to give birth to a daughter for the master as soon as possible. Whether it's a boy or a girl, it's father's child. I believe father will love them all the same. I nodded heavily. It's already the 7th month. Did the child die after birth, or was it never born at all? At this thought, my fingers turned white from clenching too hard. If my own mother couldn't even tolerate her own daughter, how could she possibly accept a concubine's child who would compete with Wang Tsuebao for wealth and affection? Is my father home? After meeting the concubine, I had a plan in mind. Miss, please have your meal first. No need, I'll wait for my father to return. Liu Niang gave a helpless bitter smile, her gaze at me seeming to hold back words. Such an easygoing, gentle nature, clearly the daughter of a well-off family. If she were a bit more ruthless, there would be no place in this mansion for me and my mother. In this world, kind-hearted good people don't live with dignity. Liu Niang went to fetch my father. For the first time in 2 lives, I met my father, in his mid-30s, with a fair complexion and no beard. He had the appearance of a kind-hearted man, one could say gentle and refined. Although he was my biological father, he had never seen or held me before. His gaze was unfamiliar when he looked at me, seeming concerned, yet momentarily at a loss for what to do. Did something difficult happen on the way? I knelt before him, knocking my head heavily on the ground, and recounted everything my mother had done. Father, the year after you left for the capital to take the imperial exams, grandmother passed away. Mother said that father had no conscience. If he knew grandmother had died, he would abandon us, mother and daughter, and then we might not even have the little silver we had. It was better to keep using grandmother to keep him tied to us. It wasn't until this year, when father passed the exams with high honors and asked us to come to the capital, only then did mother write a letter in tears, telling father that grandma had passed away, and that she had kept it from him all this time for fear of breaking his heart. All these years, she had been using the money father sent for writing materials to raise Wang Tsuebao, yet she was stingy about spending even a penny of father's money on me or grandma. After grandma died, she was wrapped in a tattered straw mat and hastily buried. I also told him about how mother had an illicit affair with a wild man and gave birth to Wang Tsuebao. Then used the pretense of her being the daughter of a life-saving benefactor to force me to serve Wang Tsuebao like a beast of burden. These matters were too shocking to believe, and both father and Aunt Liu were hesitant, not entirely convinced of my identity. I knew these words were hard to believe, but I am Chen Jinju, and I am telling the truth. If they are willing to investigate, they will uncover the reality. Father, if you don't believe me, you can send someone to the village to inquire. Just don't go to Zhao his house. The fiancé you arranged for me has long been bewitched by Wang Tsuebao. They conspired to take me to the bandits' territory to harm me, so that illegitimate child could take my place. Then where is your mother now? He asked with a grim expression, pacing back and forth. They intended to harm others but ended up being harmed themselves. Captured by the mountain bandits, I gritted my teeth, tears streaming uncontrollably down my face. In the end, Madame Liu arranged for me to stay in a courtyard not far from hers. Madame Liu came to talk with me every day, and the servants under her supervision were as reasonable as she was. 2 months later, Madame Liu went into labor and gave birth to a son for father, his only son. He was overjoyed and intended to groom him as his successor, adding his name to the family register, yet his gaze fell upon the family register entry of his eldest daughter. I believe that someone who could rise to the position of Prime Minister is no ordinary person to be easily manipulated. A few days later, father announced to the public that his legitimate eldest daughter, Chen Jinju, had arrived in the capital, but his first wife had passed away on the journey after encountering bandits. I took the opportunity to propose that Liunyang be elevated to the status of a formal wife. Liunyang was overjoyed and overwhelmed with gratitude toward me. But I still wasn't entirely at ease, so I invited my father's former teacher in the capital and his wife to serve as matchmakers, ensuring that Liunyang would marry my father with great honor and ceremony. I wanted everyone in the capital to know that the top scholar of the imperial examination had elevated his longtime concubine to the status of his official wife. Day by day passed, and I shed my ugly shell. Under careful nurturing, my delicate features became dazzling. There were also some young men from good families and with fine character who came to propose marriage. Aunt Liu was enthusiastic about finding me a husband, but during a noble lady's boating excursion, I lost my balance and fell onto a handsome man. He exuded an air of nobility, his peach blossom eyes smiling at me with a mix of affection and indifference. Using the handle of his folding fan, he lifted my chin and asked which official's family I belonged to. I had never been treated with such rudeness before. Furious and anxious, I jumped into the water to prove my innocence, and by the time I was rescued, I was half dead. A few days later, an oral decree came from the Eastern Palace, ordering me to become the Crown Prince's concubine. Liu Niang was genuinely worried for me, saying that being a concubine was not a good fate. Because of this decree, my father was also ostracized by his colleagues, who accused him of feigning integrity while using his daughter to cling to the Crown Prince. For a time, rumors spread that I had intentionally thrown myself into the Crown Prince's arms. Some noble ladies who were present that day testified on my behalf, confirming it was purely accidental. After the incident, I attempted to drown myself in despair. Had I not been rescued in time, I might not have survived. Hearing these rumors, my heart turned to ashes. I immediately went to a nunnery in the outskirts of the capital to shave my head and become a nun, but my father had me forcibly brought back. He declared that he would rather resign from his official post than let his daughter become a nameless, statusless concubine. That very day, his resignation memorial was submitted to the emperor. For a time, the story of my father and me spread among the common people. Everyone praised my father for raising a daughter who understood propriety and upheld her integrity. Even colleagues who had previously ostracized him began to seek his friendship. The next day, a consort from the palace summoned Liu Niang to the imperial court. Upon her return, Liu Niang brought back an imperial decree. The emperor declared that I was of noble character, a model for all women, and should not end up in a nunnery due to a twist of fate. He arranged my marriage to the crown prince. With the decree issued, I, the daughter of a minor Hanlin scholar, leaped to become the crown princess, rising to the highest status in one step. Yet the crown prince stormed over to confront me, completely devoid of the grace and charm he had shown that day. He merely thought of adding another dispensable concubine to his harem, never expecting that a woman like me, who had been a farm girl for over a decade, with nothing but a minor scholar as my backing, would secure the position of crown princess. The legitimate wife of the crown prince should be a noble lady from a prominent family, a daughter of heaven who could bring him substantial support. Furious, he accused me of being malicious, declaring that even if I married into the Eastern Palace, I would be nothing more than a statue to him. I was never the wife he had in mind. How absurd! In my past life, Wang Xuebao, through a mere twist of fate, had captured the crown prince's heart at first sight, and he insisted on making her his crown princess. It seems the so-called noble and esteemed crown prince is nothing more than this. I wept in despair. Your Highness, the marriage decree was issued by His Majesty. I dare not defy it. If you are dissatisfied, you may go to the emperor yourself to state your grievances. By coming to me, you are merely venting your anger on me and forcing me to death. A coward, dissatisfied with the marriage, yet too afraid to confront the emperor, and instead comes to bully a weakling like me who cannot resist him. Such a person, indulging in lust, with eyes only for himself and his own desires, is actually the crown prince of a nation. How laughable! The prince's face flushed and paled with anger at my words, seething with rage. Then, as if struck by a sudden thought, he gently stroked my hand, only to recoil with a flicker of disgust upon touching the calluses from years of labor. We are both pitiful souls trapped by circumstance. Since things have come to this, let it be so. His eyes were clouded with an impenetrable gloom. In my past life, it was with these same distinct, bony fingers that he had meticulously drawn a chessboard on my face, stroke by stroke. Why should he, as the crown prince, be allowed to trample on others' lives so recklessly? Those he cherishes should enjoy boundless wealth and glory. Those he disregards are not even allowed to breathe without being in the wrong. 2 years later, on the day my father was promoted to a Grand Secretary of the Inner Court, I was 17, with just half a year left until my wedding to the Crown Prince. In recent years, the times have been hard. With severe droughts in the north and floods in the south, waves of disaster victims have emerged, and the court is utterly powerless to provide relief. Liu Niang and I were amusing our babbling younger brother when someone outside the door claimed to be the deceased first wife. A flicker of panic flashed in Liu Niang's eyes. I patted the back of Liu Niang's hand. "Mother, you are the legitimate wife father married openly. My birth mother has long passed away." I went with Liu Niang to see mother. After 2 years, she had changed a great deal. In the past, she would always order me around, scolding and hitting me at the slightest displeasure. Later, when she became the Prime Minister's wife, her superior air could crush me to the dust with just one glance. Now it's different. She is emaciated, absent-minded, and her eyes are timid and shrunken. Only when she saw me did she seem to come alive, as if she could have devoured me on the spot. "Beast, you beast. I will skin you alive. I want to see my husband. I want her to see what kind of thing you really are. I am the legitimate wife of the cabinet reader-in-waiting, the lady of the house. I am not dead." Behind her was Wang Tsuebao, covered in dust and looking haggard, having lost a lot of weight but still fair and beautiful. Even though her dress was so dirty its original color was unrecognizable, she still looked like a fairy from a painting. It seems that despite the hardships of the past 2 years in the bandits' den, Wang Tsuebao hasn't had it too bad. I gently curled the corners of my lips. "Isn't this my dear sister? Why are you hiding timidly behind mother? I thought with your pride, you would have long ended it all to preserve your purity." Wang Tsuebao's face turned pale, the jealousy and resentment in her eyes almost tangible, yet she still offered me a flattering smile. "Sister, what are you saying? Although mother and I were among the bandits, we have always kept our purity. Even if you hate me to the core, you shouldn't deny mother. Could you please show some mercy and let mother reunite with her sworn brother, innocent?" "Who would believe that? And has my father ever acknowledged you? You bastard, how dare you keep calling him godfather?" I raised an eyebrow and continued, "My father is an honest official. Do you really think that by recognizing him, you can become an official's wife or daughter, you shameless sluts, who have pleasured thousands of men? How can you be so brazen? I know all about their experiences at Flying Tiger Mountain, when Chen Yu treated them just as he did me in my past life." Although the bandits in the stronghold were itching for Wang Tsuebao, he forbade them from forcing themselves on Wang Tsuebao and her daughter if they were unwilling. But the village doesn't support idlers. They had to do a lot of work every day. Mother doted on Wang Tsuebao and did her share of the work as well. But how could the food earned by one person's labor be enough for 2 to eat? Wang Tsuebao, who had never known worldly hardships, had no choice but to follow her mother and do some light chores. Even so, for someone whose hands had never been stained by labor, it was still a struggle. She blamed all the mistakes on me and when Chen Yu, in addition, due to the repeated harassment from those who coveted the position of the leader in her previous life. Wang Tsuebao gritted her teeth and sided with that man, plotting to kill Wen Qianyu and seize the mountain stronghold. Little did she expect that, just after she had shared an intimate moment with him, Wen Qianyu would take action and completely eradicate those discontented bandits, uprooting them entirely. Terrified, Wang Tsuebao realized Wen Qianyu was a man of capability and sought to cling to his coattails. Wearing scanty clothing that barely covered her, she exposed her soft bosom and crawled into Wen Qianyu's bed, having witnessed the leader's prowess. She had already decided to use her body to fight for what she wanted, so what did it matter who she attached herself to? Wen Qianyu's appearance and character were far superior to that of the previous lowlife. When Qianyu threw her off the bed and ordered his men to escort them down the mountain, Wang Tsuebao and her mother were both shocked and delighted. They inquired their way to the capital, asking about her father's residence, upon hearing that her father's first wife had passed away. They assumed he was unaware of the truth, and their minds immediately became active with ideas. They had no idea that the reason they could safely reach the capital was because when Qianyu had sent people to protect them along the way. Little did they expect that upon arriving in the capital, they would learn I had already found my father and become the future crown princess. Wang Xuebao's smile vanished completely, her gaze at me as sharp as poison. Sister, how can you harm me and mother like this without a guilty conscience? A guilty conscience. In my past life, I had a conscience, and it led me to a miserable death. In this life, if they weren't still of some use, I wouldn't have given them the chance to see me at all. I watched them coldly and had the mother and daughter beaten and thrown out. Mother couldn't believe how heartless I was and started cursing loudly, making a scene at the mansion gate. The servants broke her legs and threw her to the ground, where she lay wailing. Wang Xuebao stood far away, looking as if her heart was being torn apart, yet unwilling to approach mother, who was rolling on the ground in agony, but she did not hesitate to stand on the moral high ground and accuse me. Sister, how can you be so heartless as to deny our mother? She worked so hard to raise you, and now that you've found your biological father, are you just going to abandon her? Seeing that more and more people were gathering, I immediately ordered someone to take them to the brothel. Only then did mother and Wang Xuebao panic, gritting their teeth and saying, Sister, you are so cruel, don't regret being so ruthless today. The butler's only son stared blankly at Wang Xuebao's receding figure. All of this, of course, did not escape my notice. That night, Liunyang told her father about meeting her mother. Her father listened in silence. But a murderous glint flashed in his eyes. He might have once been a principled man who acted according to his conscience, but after 2 years of grinding in the officialdom, his temperament had long since changed. Jinju, it's your father who has wronged you. I quickly shook my head with a smile. Another half-month passed peacefully, when suddenly some idle gossip began to circulate in the capital. The crown prince had become infatuated with a courtesan, and despite his impending grand wedding, he insisted on taking her as his concubine. After getting drunk with friends and causing a scene at the tavern, I claimed that my love for the courtesan was genuine, that she had fallen into the life of a courtesan out of helplessness, and that she was a pitiable soul. Since I couldn't marry her as my principal consort in this lifetime, I would still redeem her and bring her into the Eastern Palace as a secondary consort. I would stand by her through thick and thin, sharing a lifetime of love and devotion, even if it meant defying the entire world. Madame Liu, who mingled with the wives of officials, heard these words and anxiously tried to counsel me. I smiled as I finished embroidering the last twin lotus flower on the wedding handkerchief, then gently patted the back of Madame Liu's hand to reassure her. The boat will straighten out when it reaches the bridge. There's no need to worry, mother. I'm marrying the crown prince to be his principal wife. So why should I bother with these frivolous distractions? What came to mind was the scene from my previous life, where the crown prince, with his pampered hands, and Zhao he used a dagger to carve a chessboard on my face, competing for favor in a fit of jealousy. I couldn't help but laugh. What a perfect pair they made. In the first life, the crown prince fell in love with Wang Xuebao at first sight, disregarding her lowly status at the time, married her as his principal consort. And after the wedding, he was busy competing with all the admirers who flocked to Wang Xuebao. In the second life, even after Wang Xuebao had fallen to the status of a courtesan, the crown prince was utterly captivated the moment he laid eyes on her. After just a few encounters, he was willing to defy the world to bring her into the Eastern Palace as a secondary consort with great pomp. Making a prostitute a consort, he truly isn't afraid of tarnishing the royal family's reputation. Since the crown prince is so convinced of their unwavering love, then let's wish them locked together forever. Sure enough, the emperor learned of the crown prince's scandalous affair and immediately confronted him in court. Led by the grand tutor, several civil officials repeatedly submitted memorials condemning the crown prince for bringing shame to the royal family over a woman from a pleasure boat. The emperor of this dynasty has indeed been diligent in governance. Yet his abilities are mediocre, and he has struggled to produce heirs. Only 2 princes have reached adulthood. One is the third prince, who often coughs up blood and is never without medicine, and the other is the current crown prince, with only this one son capable of inheriting the throne. The emperor naturally indulges and favors him, and the crown prince, feeling secure in this favor, acts without fear. Though I am the crown prince, I can't even spend my life with the woman I love. What use is being the crown prince then? Father, you might as well strip me of my title and make me a commoner, so I can live out my days with Xuanyang, just the 2 of us. What I share with Xuanyang is true love. Even if I'm forced to marry a crown princess, she would be nothing more than a decoration. I would never let anyone surpass Xuanyang. The emperor was so furious that he cursed several times. You wretched creature. All the civil and military officials in the court knelt down in fear. However, the emperor merely raised his hand high but brought it down lightly, only confining the crown prince to his quarters for half a month. It wasn't until 2 months later that Wang Xuebao became pregnant. The emperor relented and allowed the pregnant courtesan to enter the Eastern Palace, but he still refused to let a concubine enter the palace before the crown princess took her place. Only granting her the status of a consort, perhaps aware that the crown prince's actions were rather unseemly, the palace sent a continuous stream of lavish gifts to me. I accepted them all, then promptly had them converted into rice and grain in the crown prince's name and donated to the disaster victims. In no time, the common people only knew that the crown prince was madly in love, while his future consort had the welfare of the people at heart, fearing that Wang Xuebao might feel wronged. The crown prince welcomed her into the Eastern Palace with great fanfare, scattering thousands of taels of silver in celebratory coins along the streets. The disaster victims in both places had nowhere to settle, lying outside the city gates, waiting for when they might have food to fill their stomachs. The court had no choice but to impose layers of exploitation downward, forcing the people of various regions to pay the following year's taxes in advance, for a time. In areas beyond the reach of imperial authority, countless decent people who could no longer survive turned to banditry, and large and small groups of bandits emerged endlessly. Suppressing the bandits was imperative, but the northern Walla region was also affected by the drought, and several tribes unwilling to submit to imperial authority were eyeing the fertile central plains with growing ambition. The emperor had to deploy the main army to the northern border to display his might. Natural disasters and human calamities plagued the dynasty, leaving it besieged by both external threats and internal strife. Utterly overwhelmed, amid such trying times, I went with the officials' families to the Guardian Temple to pray for blessings, where I encountered the Crown Prince and Wang Xuebao. A prayer event organized by several leading noblewomen in the capital drew nearly half of the city's elite women. Though ostensibly for blessings, it was in fact a fundraising effort. The pampered officials' wives, to show their sincerity, supported each other as they climbed to the Hugua temple halfway up the mountain, only to be rudely blocked at the entrance by the guards. Where did these country women come from, disturbing the noble guests? They deserved to be beaten to death without a second thought. The noble women were both shocked and angered. Noble guests, which noble family? Perhaps I even know them. Who is making such a commotion? A well-dressed maid came out, looking the officials' wives up and down with disdain in her eyes. Where did these lowly maids come from, daring to claim acquaintance with my lady? Get lost now. This instantly infuriated all the noblewomen, led by the Grand Princess. They demanded that the noble lady inside the temple come out and answer them. The little maid had never seen such a scene before. Without saying a word, she ran straight into the temple and even locked the main gate. As if avoiding the matter would make it go away, I frowned at the sight, finding it utterly ridiculous. When traveling, noble women wear simple-looking dresses that may appear ordinary, but they are far from being made of cheap fabric. It's just that the maid by Wang Xuebao's side didn't recognize quality when she saw it. After arriving at the brothel, Wang Xuebao refused to entertain clients. She deceived this girl, who had been sold to the brothel by her family, by claiming to be the daughter of an official family, saying that she had been replaced by a villain and fallen into this situation, and that she would surely regain her noble status in the future, and so on. The maid was also a foolish person. She took on clients for Wang Xuebao, which allowed Wang Xuebao to maintain her purity and form a deep bond with the Crown Prince. Having used her, Wang Xuebao couldn't just kick the girl out under the Crown Prince's watchful eyes. So she brought her into the Eastern Palace as a personal maid. On the surface, this maid was the trusted confidant of the Crown Prince's favored concubine, and everyone had to show her some respect, but in private, she was constantly looked down upon and disdained. Wang Xuebao naturally wouldn't allow her so-called benefactor to demand repayment for a favor, which is why she orchestrated this scene, by having her maid openly defy the future Crown Princess. She could make the Crown Prince sympathize with her struggles as a concubine, deepen his dislike for me, and seize the opportunity to punish the maid, killing 3 birds with 1 stone. But no matter how clever Wang Xuebao's schemes were, they were useless. Every move she made today was guided by my hand. She only knew that I had submitted a request to Hugua Temple half a month ago, so she pestered the Crown Prince to set aside his duties and accompany her to the temple for a leisurely stroll, wanting me to see how much my future husband cared for her, and also to have the Crown Prince witness my jealous and frantic behavior. What she didn't know was that although the request was made in Liu Niang's name, Nearly half the noble women of the capital had come, including even the emperor's most respected aunt, who had personally attended. With the Grand Princess presiding, there was no room for me to speak up, so I kept a low profile among the noble ladies. After about half an hour of back and forth, a flustered monk finally reported to the abbot that the esteemed guest had left abruptly due to urgent matters. The noble women exchanged glances, knowing that this person had kicked an iron plate and run away. Go and see which family is so ill-mannered. For the first time being treated so rudely, the Grand Princess was angered. A trace of hesitation flickered across my face, which was noticed by Lady Liu. "What's the matter, young lady?" The noblewoman beside me cast a glance my way. I shook my head with a bitter smile. "It's nothing." Her gaze lingered like a drawn thread, settling on the carriage about to be obscured by the mountain. Only then did the crowd notice the emblem unique to the Crown Prince. At this, everyone's expressions turned peculiar. "It's him. No wonder he'd do something so absurd. That flower girl really has no manners, not even coming to greet the mistress when she sees her." I laughed awkwardly and said, "Maybe it wasn't her. Besides, I haven't married the Crown Prince yet." The Grand Princess, seeing this, took my hand and comforted me. "You're a good one, still thinking of covering for that person. But this matter is rather unsavory after all, so let's not speak of it anymore." She then asked the host, "Was there a man accompanying that distinguished guest you mentioned?" The host, knowing the princess's identity, was so terrified that he wished to kneel and beg for mercy. He spilled everything like pouring beans from a sack, recounting how Wang Xuebao and the Crown Prince had entered the temple, engaged in intimate behavior, and dismissed all bystanders. Upon hearing this, the Grand Princess's face darkened completely. How dare such shameless acts occur even within the Buddhist temple? I lowered my gaze and remained silent. What was this compared to everything else? Wang Xuebao and the Crown Prince had been indulging in debauchery day and night, and it had long been the talk of the town. Countless erotic illustrated books depicting their affairs had been sold on the black market. I also spent a considerable amount of silver to print several more copies and sent them to various entertainment houses and brothels. In the previous life, the love between Wang Xuebao and the Crown Prince was a legendary tale passed down through the ages, but in this life, Wang Xuebao is merely a lowly courtesan who rose to power, and the Crown Prince is a useless fool obsessed with love. However, the Grand Princess was so angry not because the Crown Prince was exclusively favoring a courtesan, but because today was a crucial day when key ministers from the Ministry of Works, the Ministry of Revenue, and the Ministry of War were discussing how to resettle disaster victims and eliminate banditry across the regions, a matter the Emperor had personally assigned to the Crown Prince. The Crown Prince abandoned the state and its people, caring only for his pleasures with Wang Xuebao. After the prayer ceremony, the Grand Princess went straight to the central palace. The next day, the Crown Prince behaved improperly before the court and was severely reprimanded by the Emperor. The Emperor investigated several tasks under his charge and, in anger, executed several of the Crown Prince's key subordinates, ordering him to swiftly handle the issues of disaster victims and bandits. After this incident, the Crown Prince indeed became much more subdued, focusing wholeheartedly on resettling the disaster victims and recruiting capable individuals from all around to deal with the bandit troubles. It wasn't until the only legitimate granddaughter of the Grand Princess began arranging a marriage alliance, only to be sent off by the Crown Prince to a political marriage with the Oirats under the pretext of pacification, acting first and reporting later, that the Emperor was truly enraged. The Crown Prince went into a frenzy at the court. The Grand Princess has received the nation's tributes, and her granddaughter has also been showered with imperial favor when the royal family needs them. It is only natural for them to ease the royal family's worries. I have already negotiated with the Oirat envoy to confer upon my cousin the title of Junju and marry her off as a concubine to the leader of the Oirat. You unfilial son, our dynasty intimidates the Oirat, and if the Oirat seek peace, they should be the ones offering sincerity. Why should our dynasty degrade a Junju? A Junju is more than worthy of being the principal consort to the ruler of another country. Yet the Crown Prince insists on using the title to humiliate the Grand Princess by marrying her off as a concubine to an old man who could be her grandfather. The Crown Prince, emboldened and without fear, said, "How can our great dynasty go back on its word? Since His Majesty has already entrusted this matter to me, I ask that you refrain from further interference." The Emperor was momentarily enraged. The Crown Prince dared to act so recklessly only because he was the Emperor's only healthy son, and there was no one else to inherit the throne. The feudal lords were not without the bloodline of their ancestors, But how could the emperor willingly hand over the hard-won empire to someone else? Meanwhile, as the initial famine passed, the disaster situation in various regions began to ease, without Zhao He to suppress the bandits, and with the imperial court taking little effective action. The bandits began to prey on each other, large gangs devour small gangs, and the common folk who could barely survive were either brutally killed or forced to join the bandits. Even government offices were looted. At this time, when Chenyua's bandit stronghold became famous, they had occupied the area for many years, never harming the local people, and even provided grain to disaster victims. They drove away all the outside bandits who coveted the region, absorbed thousands of followers, and were known as heroes. The local bandit gangs subtly began to regard him as their leader. On the day when Chenyu arrived in the capital with his men bearing the amnesty decree, it was also the day of my grand wedding with the crown prince. Due to the continuous unrest caused by refugees and bandits across the regions, I proposed cutting down the wedding expenses as much as possible. Upon hearing this, the crown prince sneered, shook his head, and insisted on holding a lavish and dignified ceremony, inviting all the officials of the capital along with their wives and daughters. Everyone said the crown prince held me in high esteem, believing that once I entered the Eastern Palace, I could steer him away from the seductive consort and back onto the right path. Only I knew that the crown prince had long been bewitched by Wang Xuebao and intended to humiliate me in front of the entire capital, casting me into the depths of hell. As I sat in the 8-man sedan chair, receiving congratulations from the noblewomen and ladies of the city, Wang Xuebao, without any hindrance, stepped forward with her swollen pregnant belly, declaring she would expose my true nature. Accompanying her was my mother, who had been living in a villa outside the palace. My mother had long shed her tattered clothes, now adorned in grandeur from head to toe, carrying herself with an air of superiority as if she were born to be a lady flattered by all. It was just that the coldness in her eyes almost pierced through me. Not only was I waiting for this day, but they were too. Wang Xuebao's face was as pale as paper, her eyes filled with disbelief, as if she would shatter at the slightest touch. Erlang, is she the crown princess you mentioned? She cannot be the crown princess. The crown prince showed an anxious and hesitant expression. Xuanyang, you are the most gentle and considerate, it is you whom I love the most. If it weren't for the emperor's decree, how could I ever marry her? As Wang Xuebao and the crown prince began their act, the guests who had been exchanging pleasantries around them fell silent, frowning as they watched the two put on a show of affection. What a pair of despicable lovers. They had long planned to hand over my identity to Wang Xuebao on the wedding day, yet they pretended to be helpless and forced into it. I lifted the phoenix hairpin adorned with kingfisher feathers from my forehead and stood confidently by the crown prince's side. If you are the crown prince's concubine, today is our wedding day. Whatever matter you have, we can discuss it after today. Wang Xuebao stared fixedly at my wedding dress, a flash of jealousy and hatred in her eyes, yet her face was deathly pale, like a white flower trembling in the wind and rain. You brought me to this state even if it costs me my life. I will expose you, this ungrateful, deceitful fraud. My mother also lunged forward, trying to slap me. After a few days of good living with Wang Xuebao, she seemed to forget that she was just a powerless, insignificant peasant woman. Before she could get close, she was stopped by the palace attendants around me. How dare you? How dare you disrespect the crown princess? My mother took the opportunity to throw a tantrum. The crown princess, she doesn't deserve it. She isn't my husband's daughter at all. She stole my daughter's identity, lied that I was dead, and that's how she became the crown princess. As soon as these words were spoken, all the high-ranking officials and nobles present were stunned. My mother then spotted Liu Niang in the crowd and vented her fury wildly. You lowly, shameless woman, a cheap concubine who threw herself at a man, how dare you join forces with this little harlot to harm me and my daughter? Once again, she knelt before my father, clutching his robe, crying her heart out with a hoarse voice. My lord, it is me. We are husband and wife bound by marriage. I have raised your daughter at home and fulfilled filial duties to your mother on your behalf. I did not die. I was only harmed by villains. You have been away from home for 17 years. You have never seen your daughter, which is why you were deceived by villains. This Jinju in your eyes is the adopted daughter I mentioned in my letters. She learned that you had achieved the top rank in the imperial examinations and, with ill intentions, took on Xuanyang's identity to reunite with you. All these years, my daughter and I have suffered greatly. Even if you do not recognize your daughter, you should at least recognize me, your lawful wife. With that, mother glared fiercely at Willow, pounding father's chest with her hand. How could you so easily believe the news of my death, letting this vile concubine have her way?" Father dodged sharply as mother lunged at him, causing her to stumble. "Watch your words. Willow supported me in my humble beginnings and has shown me immense kindness. She was made my rightful wife by the decision of my master and his wife." Mother's face twisted with rage as she looked at Willow, cursing her repeatedly as a vile woman. Wang Tsuebao watched the scene, a sinister glint flashing in her eyes as she feebly supported her belly, a clear tear tracing down her cheek. "His Majesty has always despised me, so I fear I cannot survive. Erlang, I only beg to safely give birth to our child." Wang Tsuebao's disruption of the wedding was actually a conspiracy among them. Now, seeing his beloved concubine in tears, he wished everyone would pay with their lives for her sorrow. "You have always been kind, and I adore you. Even if it costs me my life, I will protect you." Their affectionate display made the high-ranking officials and nobles at the scene frown. I watched this scene with a cold gaze, secretly exchanging a look with Father and Lady Liu, feeling reassured in my heart. Soon, the Emperor and Empress arrived in person, with all the officials kneeling in a vast crowd. Behind the throng of people followed a man who looked like a scholar. I smiled faintly and quickly, then knelt before the Emperor and Empress alongside the Crown Prince. The Emperor didn't even glance at the Crown Prince and asked me directly, "What exactly happened? You tell us." "Crown Princess," I forced a smile at the Emperor and Empress, though it looked more like a grimace. "I dare not say, Your Majesties." The Emperor and Empress frowned. The Crown Prince stepped forward, speaking before the Emperor and Empress could. "Of course you dare not say. You are not Minister Chen's daughter, just an orphan girl adopted by Xuanyang and her mother." After Lord Chen passed the imperial examination, Xuanyang and her mother intended to bring you to the capital. But you repaid their kindness with betrayal. You seized their money and credentials, driving them to desperation and nearly costing them their lives, while you yourself assumed Xuanyang's identity and became an official's daughter. Hearing this, I shook my head with a bitter smile. It seems the Crown Prince had already caught wind of this and was waiting until today, our wedding day, to confront me. He intends to destroy me. You admit it. You were always vicious and deserved to die. This is the consequence of your own actions. The Crown Prince's eyes lit up, his handsome face contorted almost beyond recognition. "Guards, seize this venomous woman. My Xuanyang is Lord Chen's true daughter, the legitimate heir. She should be the Crown Princess. Your Highness the Crown Prince." The Crown Prince. Nonsense. The matter has not been fully investigated yet. How can we rely solely on one side of the story? Several different voices arose in the scene. "Chen Qing, is this true?" the Emperor asked slowly. Father knelt before the Emperor, his face a mix of shame and indignation. "Your Majesty, it is my failure in handling family affairs that led to today's incident. I have disgraced Your Majesty's presence. This old woman was indeed my wife, but I have already removed her from the family register. From now on, her life and death have nothing to do with me." Upon hearing this, Mother's eyes turned sharp. Very well, I thought you were deceived. But it turns out you are nothing but a Chen Shimai abandoning your wife to marry another, knowingly breaking the law. You abused your mother-in-law, had an affair with another man and gave birth to a bastard, and even attempted to harm Jinju. Why shouldn't I divorce you? Father coldly glared at my mother, recounting how she had a daughter with another man, used the money he earned from copying books day and night to raise Wang Tsuebao, yet treated me like a servant. The more he spoke, the uglier mother and Wang Tsuebao's expressions became, but they stubbornly refused to admit it, claiming father had been bewitched by me. They even had the Crown Prince bring in a witness. When I saw who it was, I nearly burst out laughing. "Uncle Wang, what brings you to the capital? It's been 2 years since we last met. Have you redeemed Auntie yet?" "Redeemed?" The noble women all cast cold glances at Uncle Wang. I frowned. "What about Area? Did you still accept the 200 coins from the old man in the neighboring village and give Area to his foolish son as a bride?" At this, Uncle Wang couldn't hold it in first and wet himself right before the Emperor, yet he still didn't hide his previous contempt for me. "Jinju, you wretched brat. If you keep spouting nonsense, I'll have your mother beat you to death." Halfway through, he suddenly stopped speaking. Remembering that he was supposed to testify for my mother and Wang Tsuebao today, but provoked by me, he had exposed his true nature. I seized the opportunity. "Since you're here to testify that I'm an orphan, how could my mother beat me to death?" The Empress waved her hand in disgust, no longer willing to listen to the testimony he wished to present, and ordered him to be dragged away immediately. Wang Tsuebao and her mother grew even paler. The reason they dared to cause a scene at the wedding, aside from the Crown Prince's partiality and willingness to support them, was that they had already conspired in advance. Wang Tsuebao then had someone carry out Zhao He. The once robust and imposing man was now as gaunt as a withered skeleton. I looked at the half-paralyzed Zhao He with calm composure. For the past 2 years, he had been living right under my watch, and I knew exactly the miserable, subhuman life he was enduring. 2 months ago, I finally threw him onto the path my mother would inevitably take. When she saw him, she avoided him in disgust and hurried away. He wandered the streets for several days before Wang Tsuebao, who had decided to seek revenge, picked him up. Even though he was no longer homeless, both my mother and Wang Tsuebao treated him as a useless burden. On the surface, the mother claimed he had suffered and vowed to avenge him, ordering the servants to take good care of him, yet she pretended not to see when he was abused by them. Zhao He, however, believed that Wang Tsuebao and her mother lived by reading others' expressions and feared implicating them, so he endured in silence all along. Little did he know that Wang Tsuebao and her mother were eager for Zhao He to die as soon as he was no longer of use. His past involvement with Wang Tsuebao was something the Crown Prince must never find out about. Now when he sees me, his eyes bulge like brass bells, his whole body trembling with effort, as if he's about to leap off the bamboo pole to strike me. Ha 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 ha, Chen Jinju, you're going to get your retribution. You thought you had me dead to rights back then, never expected I'd survive, did you? I'll drag you down to hell even if I die. Zhao He gnashed his teeth in fury. I stepped back in fear, the forced composure on my face crumbling, my voice already tinged with sobs. Brother Zhao, how did you become like this? You say I harmed you, but how did I harm you? You adore your sister and insisted on breaking off our engagement. We've long had no contact, so how can you blame me for your injury? Besides, how could I, a mere woman, possibly harm such a tall and imposing man like you? Zhao His arrogance faltered, and he hurriedly explained, it was you. It was clearly you who said Tsuebao was critically ill, led me to the abandoned temple, and tried to kill me. How could I have killed you? My mother and I left the village with our family to search for father. While you were still in the village, dozens of people can testify I never saw you. How could I have harmed you? Exactly. When my mother and I went to the capital, nearly half the county knew about it. Zhao He didn't even have a travel permit. How could he have gone there? Zhao He realized he had misspoken. Clearly it was you with your venomous heart, trying to harm me and Tsuebao. Brother Zhao, Wang Tsuebao quickly cried out in a delicate, tearful voice, don't let her lead you into a trap. I've even brought the son of father's steward to verify my identity. I fell silent, kneeling motionless before the emperor and empress, leaving everything to their judgment, yet my gaze inadvertently met Wen Qianyue's, and I caught the cold glint in each other's eyes. Wang Tsuebao first caused a scene at the wedding, then brought my mother to expose me, and even summoned elders from a village thousands of miles away. She had Zhao He and the steward's son testify, arranging everything meticulously, but the more methodical her actions became, the more the officials sensed that something was amiss. Wasn't the affair between the Crown Prince and this favored concubine prearranged? Just waiting for today to cause trouble? What a fool, still delusional enough to think she could replace the Crown Princess. How could the Crown Prince be so foolish, to be manipulated by such a vile and lowly courtesan? 2 years ago, when Minister Chen acknowledged his daughter, he invited all the elders from the village to the capital to identify her. There was no possibility of a mistaken identity. If father wasn't completely certain, how could he have acknowledged my identity? At that time, father invited most of the elders in the village to thoroughly investigate the past of my mother and me in the village. During the recognition, many of father's close colleagues, friends, and fellow disciples were present, all of whom could testify for me. From the very beginning, the scheme Wang Tsuebao and my mother had in mind was impossible to succeed. Hearing the officials' discussions, Wang Tsuebao could no longer maintain her disguise. Beads of sweat densely forming on her forehead as she supported her pregnant belly with her hand. Seeing this, the Crown Prince's heart tightened. Tsuenyang, is something wrong with the child in your belly? The Empress Dowager's face also changed drastically, her gaze fixed intently on Wang Tsuebao's belly. It was their hope, the Emperor's only grandson, their chance to turn things around. Erlang, it's my fault. I never expected she had already blocked all my escape routes. Even if I had 10,000 mouths, I couldn't clear my name now. Only you know what kind of person I am, and as long as you understand, that is enough. Although I have fallen into the brothel, I gave myself to you with a pure body, and when I leave, I will belong to you alone. She smiled bitterly, her eyes filled with deep affection. After I give birth to our child, I will leave this world. so as not to cause you any trouble, Erlang." The crown prince's eyes immediately reddened with rage. Like a madman, he grabbed a sword from a nearby guard and charged at me. "You poisonous woman, what a clever trick you've played." The wedding banquet descended into chaos. Countless guards rushed to restrain the crown prince, but none dared to harm him. The crown prince, however, had no such reservations. He slashed and stabbed wildly in my direction. I couldn't dodge in time, suffering cuts on my face and hands, leaving me in a wretched state. Yet, deep down, I wished for the crown prince to grow even more frenzied. The emperor and empress were greatly alarmed by the sight and quickly ordered the crown prince to be restrained. At the same time, several imperial physicians were summoned to examine me. At that moment, when Chen Yu stepped out from behind the crowd, a faint smile curling at the corners of his lips, his limpid eyes fixed on Wang Xuebao. Upon seeing Wen Chen Yu, Wang Xuebao's already pale face turned ashen like a vengeful ghost. Her beautiful eyes filled with disbelief. "Is it you? You're actually here. You're a bandit." "He's a bandit. How could he be here?" Wang Xuebao was speaking incoherently. Her days in the mountain stronghold had been her nightmare. She used her body to seduce the mountain bandits. If the crown prince were to find out, she would lose her only remaining support. She stared fixedly at Wen Chen Yu. Her eyes filled with pleading, longing, and also a threat. But when Chen Yu came today precisely to cast her into the 18th level of hell, he smiled faintly. "It's you. You escaped from the village and actually became the crown prince's person. It seems the crown prince really likes you." Father also stepped forward at this moment. "You were originally a bastard born from an illicit affair, then failed in framing Jinju and were abducted to become a bandit's prostitute. Later worked as a courtesan in a brothel, and now you dare to bully my daughter like this. Do you think I truly don't know?" This statement directly sealed the truth about the deeds Wang Xuebao and mother had done, exposing everything to the world. The crown prince looked at Wang Xuebao in disbelief. Is what they said true? Wang Xuebao, however, stared at Wen Chen Yu as if she were seeing a ghost, her entire body trembling violently. No more words were needed. Her reaction had already given the answer. Everyone present had always looked down on Wang Xuebao and her daughter, and now they couldn't even stand the sight of them, finding them repulsive. The crown prince was as if struck by a sudden blow, relentlessly interrogating Wang Xuebao, his eyes bloodshot and his appearance like a ferocious ghost. The emperor and empress, seeing the situation becoming increasingly unbearable, directly ordered the crown prince and Wang Xuebao to be taken away. While all the other witnesses were executed, the crown prince did not step out of the Eastern Palace for half a month. All the officials in the court acted according to the emperor's will, and no one dared to plead for the crown prince. Although the wedding was not completed, I still entered the royal family and became the legitimate wife of the crown prince. The crown prince never left the Eastern Palace, entangled day and night with Wang Xuebao. At times, he would strangle her and tell her to die. At other times, he would regret it, hold her, and say sorry. Sometimes, he would drunkenly whip her, only to deeply regret it the next day and summon the imperial physician to treat her, repeating like this. Wang Xuebao was mentally and physically exhausted from the torment, yet she still acted arrogantly in front of me. So what if you're the crown princess? So what if my past is disgraceful? The crown prince still loves me the most. I am his true love. Once he becomes the emperor and I give birth to a royal son, I will still be above everyone else. Because of her, I took pleasure in placing my people every day, gradually taking full control of the Eastern Palace. Half a month later, the emperor, who had been waiting for the crown prince to repent, finally gave up and demoted him to the Prince of Yong, moving him to an abandoned former dynasty residence. The new crown prince was the third prince, who had long been bedridden with illness. Only after losing his status as crown prince did the Prince of Yong wake up to reality, but it was already too late. He couldn't even leave the prince's residence. Only I could freely come and go from the prince's residence. He began to show me every kindness, and while I pretended to agree on the surface, I cut off any possibility for him and Wang Xuebao to send messages to the outside world. I repeatedly forced him to take the madness-inducing drug and spread his complaints about the emperor's unfairness and curses against the new crown prince to the outside, to the point where the emperor and empress no longer wished to mention this son. Without me having to lift a finger, the new crown prince had no intention of letting him live as a threat. He died, on the belly of a maid in the backyard chamber. As absurd as it could be, years later, when commoners mentioned this deposed crown prince, they would spit twice to ward off the bad luck. His body was hastily buried, with a ceremony even less grand than that of an ordinary prince, and the burial goods were pitifully few. with the death of the Prince of Yong, Wang Xuebao lost her last pillar of support. She, with her heavily pregnant belly, insisted frantically on accompanying me to serve the mediocre king. I told her to rest and give birth safely, but after she delivered the child, I snatched the baby away, petitioned the emperor to grant the child the title of prince, and took the child to a remote fiefdom. I imprisoned her in the farthest corner of the palace, denied her food daily, and left only a few malicious guards by her side. Only when she pleased these guards would they reward her with a bowl of rice mixed with lard. I forbade her from falling ill, forced her to do the most degrading tasks, yet gave her hope by letting her know that the child she gave birth to was the emperor's only grandson. And Zhao He, I spared him, tamed him into a human dog, panting and begging for food from everyone. Only when he saw Wang Xuebao, a glimmer of light would still flash in his eyes. I put a dog collar on him and tied him in front of Wang Xuebao's courtyard, watching as she repeatedly used her body to seduce the guards in exchange for food. Later, the old emperor died, and the new crown prince ascended the throne. The new emperor tried hard to produce an heir, but his health was failing, and he remained childless. He attempted several times to assassinate my stepson, but when Chen Yu always informed me in advance, and I managed to avert each attempt. On several occasions, I even shielded my stepson with my own body, taking the sword for him. I am the Empress Dowager ruling from behind the curtains, and he is the regent who holds the reins of the court. The court is our stage, where our word is law. Even my own father, who has become the prime minister, is dissatisfied with our autocratic rule, but under our governance, the world is peaceful and prosperous. Unfortunately, this cheap son of mine, true to the bloodline of Wang Xuebao and the mediocre king, has listened to someone's slander, gathered his own followers, and begun to investigate his origins. I quickly filled his harem for him, though he was only 13 or 14, forced him to father 2 sons within 2 years, and after securing an heir, took him to see the already insane Wang Xuebao. By then, Wang Xuebao and Zhao He were kept by me in the cold palace, where guards and eunuchs alike could abuse them, and they had long been tormented to a state worse than pigs and dogs. I heard she says strange things all day long. No, something's wrong. I am the crown princess. I am the empress. I've lived a life of glory. How could this be? How could this be? Chen Jinju is the harlot. Didn't she die long ago? Isn't the court already on the verge of collapse? But what does that have to do with me? Before I die, the court can still hold on for a few more years. Shouldn't my life be recognized in the history books as true love? I heard this and smiled faintly, saying only that she had gone mad, yet in my heart, I had my own calculations. The young emperor, who had long been fully aware of the events of the past, saw his birth mother so tormented by me and instantly flew into a rage, vowing to kill me. This child, whom I had raised with my own hands, I had shielded him from swords with my own body multiple times to earn his trust, but upon learning of his own origins, he turned his back and wished me dead. I coldly drew the sword from the guard's side, just as the mediocre king had once swung his sword at me years ago, and thrust it through the young emperor's chest in front of Wang Xuebao, killing him. The hope that had just risen in Wang Xuebao's eyes was instantly shattered. She crawled over, wanting to see the child she had never laid eyes on since his birth. I ordered her to be dragged away. Speaking coldly, the emperor suffered a sudden surge of blood to the heart and unfortunately passed away. Tomorrow, the eldest prince shall ascend the throne. As for this wretched pair, chop them into mincemeat and feed them to the pigs, having been the Empress Dowager in power for so long. My heart has long hardened like stone. I've said it before, in this lifetime, I only wish to be the one who devours others. Only by standing at the pinnacle can I do what I wish to do. Oh, by the way, there is one more thing to say. In the year I became the Empress Dowager, I brought back the legitimate granddaughter of the Grand Princess. She is an unfortunate soul beyond my calculations, and I will protect her under my wing, allowing her to live a smooth and peaceful life. The end.